You're busy, we know. You want to get the important stuff without feeling like you're, slogging through a textbook. That's what we do here. We take a deep dive into the sources, pull out the knowledge that really matters, and hopefully give you those aha moments pretty quickly.
And today we're looking at a really interesting online discussion. It's around something that's been dubbed Mar-a-Lago Face.
Right?
We've got an article here that examines this trend, particularly how it connects to current political happenings and, well, what the author thinks might happen in a potential second Trump administration.
Exactly. So our goal, our mission for this deep dive is to understand this Mar-a-Lago Face phenomenon. What is it? Why is it getting so much attention?
Yeah.
And crucially, what does this article suggest might be the more important issues that are maybe getting overshadowed?
Okay,
so let's dive in. What exactly is Mar-a-Lago Face, according to this source material?
So the article describes it as an aesthetic trend that's gone viral. But, and this is key, it's definitely wrapped in a layer of mockery.
Okay. Mockery.
Yeah. It's aimed at women associated with Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. And it's characterized by what the source calls a hyper-feminine look, specifically mentioning tight skin, lifted cheeks, and pursed lips.
Okay, hyper-feminine. The source actually gives some specific examples too, right, to help us visualize it.
It does. It names Melania-Trump, Karoline Leavitt, Lauren Sanchez, and Kristi Noem.
Right.
And it even brings in a quote from Dr. Ahmed El-Muntasar, who's an aesthetics doctor. He gives a sort of professional description involving high cheeks, plump lips, and a lifted pixie nose.
A pixie nose.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is the detail the source goes into about how this look is supposedly achieved.
Oh, yeah. What does it say?
Well, it lists things like dermal fillers, skin laser treatments, microneedling, and also radio frequency.
Wow. Okay. So specific procedures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it also points out it's not just those procedures. The source mentions the role of, manicures and pedicures, fashion, having hair done.
The whole package.
Pretty much, yeah. Essentially a very polished, glamorous overall appearance, like the doctor noted.
Okay, so we've got a clearer picture of the aesthetic itself now. But how is this term, this phrase, being used online and in the media? It sounds like it's become more than just like noticing a similar look.
Absolutely. And that really brings us to the crucial point of how this is playing out online.
Yeah.
The source is very clear. This is being used as a form of insult, largely directed at women perceived to have opposing political views.
Okay. So weaponized.
You could say that. It even mentions a segment on Have I Got News for You, U.S., that directly compared how some of these women looked in the past versus now.
Oof. It gets quite pointed, doesn't it? The article shares some, pretty critical online comments.
Yeah, it does. There's one quoted about Laura Trump, sort of wondering if she genuinely believes she looks better now. And another about Laura Loomer calling her jigsaw and comparing her appearance to, like, a bad reaction. It's pretty cutting stuff.
Wow. Yeah, that's harsh. When you read those examples, what really struck you about that kind of rhetoric?
Well, the intensity, for one thing, the sheer personal nature of the attack.
Right.
But also just how quickly the conversation shifts, from any potential political disagreement straight to purely superficial critiques. It bypasses any substance.
Exactly. And that's precisely where the article makes its central point, isn't it?
It is.
It argues this intense focus on how these women look is maybe intentionally drawing our attention away from much more significant political issues.
The source actually calls it bad politics wrapped with a misogyny-shaped bow.
That's a strong phrase.
It is, and the source really underscores this, quoting directly. Mar-a-Lago Face isn't the problem. It's a distraction from what's really happening around us and a missed opportunity to fight back against it.
A missed opportunity.
Yeah. It even presents this, almost sarcastic idea of a news headline. Trump just toppled the stock market as a result of, frankly, stupid decisions, sure, but did you see how Melania looked last night?
Right, highlighting the skewed priorities.
Exactly. It really emphasizes the concern about skewed priorities the article has. And, it's a classic tactic, isn't it? Focus on the superficial.
To avoid the substance.
Yeah. To avoid addressing the substance, exactly.
And the article then lists a number of these substantive issues, it says, are being overshadowed.
It does. Pretty significant political events and potential policy shifts. It mentions threats related to climate chaos, the downfall of democracy, and women's rights.
Okay.
Big topics.
Huge.
Yes.
Also, the White House's stated intentions on the deportation of illegal aliens, a supposed U-turn on ending the Russia-Ukraine war. the issue of what the source calls stripping the Gulf of Mexico's identity, crackdowns on LGBT plus rights, and the pledge to end DEI initiatives.
Wow. That's quite a list of serious concerns.
And the source really drives it home by reminding us these are all supposedly within the first 100 days of a hypothetical second presidency.
Right. So the stakes are high, very high. It paints this picture of potentially massive political shifts happening while a lot of the online chat is, centered on cosmetic procedures.
It really raises a broader point about the tactics used, I guess, to derail political discussion. We see it all the time, don't we? Emotional appeals, personal attacks.
Absolutely. They often overshadow policy debates. And in this case, it seems like it's weaponizing these societal pressures around women's appearance. Why? Why do you think these tactics are often so effective?
That's a good question. I mean, it probably taps into existing biases, right?
Yeah.
And it's an easy way to dismiss someone without actually engaging with their ideas.
Yeah, avoids the hard work of debate.
For sure. The source also touches on this idea of like freedom of expression. It says it's like we're all for freedom of expression until it's a woman who doesn't think like us.
That points towards a kind of potential double standard, doesn't it?
Seems like it.
Where criticizing a woman's appearance becomes somehow an acceptable way to attack her if you don't like her politics.
It's a tricky area. And the source does try to add some nuance here, right? It's not saying these women are totally above criticism.
No, not at all. The article explicitly acknowledges they might hold controversial views that are, perfectly valid subjects for scrutiny and debate.
Okay.
However, it draws a very firm line, stating flatly that Botox isn't a political critique.
Right. Making that clear distinction.
Exactly. Between valid political analysis and just attacking someone's looks.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, women in politics, what does this trend maybe tell us?
Well, the source brings up a statistic. 53% of Americans say there are still too few women in high political office.
Over half, yeah.
And it reminds us, Kamala Harris is the first and only woman to ever have held the position of vice president.
Still the only one.
Right. So the concern here, highlighted by the article, is that this kind of relentless focus on appearance might actually contribute to why we see fewer women in these roles. It could create a hostile environment where, their ideas just become secondary to how they look.
That makes sense. And we're not talking about some small fringe internet thing here, are we?
Yeah.
The source mentions the sheer scale, the financial scale of the aesthetics industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It notes the global aesthetics industry is worth over $14 billion and counting. $14 billion.
Wow. That really puts the focus on appearance into a huge economic context.
It does. And the article uses that to frame its conclusion, saying that this new jab at fillers over fascism is setting the standard for how we view women, reducing them to nothing more than a look.
Reducing them to a look.
Yeah.
That really puts it into perspective. So boiling it down, what's the main takeaway the source wants us to get from this whole Mar-a-Lago Face discussion?
I think the core message is pretty direct. It basically says, as long as we're distracted, democracy will continue to go up in flames. Stark. Yeah. The article argues very strongly that this preoccupation with superficial appearances is pulling our attention, our energy away from really critical political issues that have, massive real-world consequences.
Okay. So just to summarize for everyone listening, we've dug into this Mar-a-Lago Face phenomenon. We looked at how the source defines it aesthetically.
The specific features and procedures.
Right. And then examined how it's being used online and in media, often as a political tool, even an insult.
Yeah. And the article's central argument, the real crux of it, is that this is a major distraction. A distraction from more important political matters, and one that unfortunately reinforces this tendency to, reduce women in the public eye just to their physical appearance.
Which brings us to a crucial point for you, the listener, to think about.
Yeah. Are these kinds of criticisms the ones focused purely on appearance, just another form of political commentary in our very visual world today? Or do they mostly function as a way to distract us, to pull focus from more substantive issues?
And maybe think about how this widespread focus on women's looks, particularly in the public sphere, might ultimately impact their willingness to even participate in politics or other important fields.
It definitely gives you something to chew on. It does.
Yeah.
In a world just saturated with visual media, with constant social commentary flying around, How can we make sure that the truly important stuff, the substantive issues, don't consistently get buried under the superficial?
And maybe what responsibility do we have, as individuals consuming and maybe even creating this content, in shaping those conversations? How do we keep the focus where it arguably matters most?